All right. Hello again, adventurers, and welcome to another exciting episode of D&D Deep Dive, the show where we dive deep into classes, subclasses, and other features of 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons to help you get the most out of your choices. So, today, we are going to be examining some more races of the multiverse, as we have been doing. So yeah, without any further ado, let's jump into this. First one we're covering today is going to be the fairy race. Now, in my research of this, for some odd reason, I thought the fairy race existed in D&D before this, but I have not been able to figure out where, unless it was like an Unearthed Arcana thing that never officially got published. I cannot find a legacy version of the fairy race. I can only find the version that is in Monsters of the Multiverse. So theoretically, and feel free to correct me in the comments down below, theoretically, fairy might be a brand new race, which I find interesting to say the least. Again, if you're looking for lore, you're not really going to get it in Monsters of the Multiverse because they just don't give it to you. And the stuff about fairies is even shorter than most. The majority of the description of the fairy race is this is what they look like, and that's it. There's no background on them. There's effectively they just talk about, oh, they're from the Feywild and they're small, and that's it. Now, when we actually get to the mechanics, again, in Monsters of the Multiverse, they have thrown out the idea of racial-based ability score improvements. Now you just get to pick which ones you want. So it does mean you have a much wider choice when you're choosing your race as far as what class you want to put them in. Like, and again, normally I would say, well, previously they kind of went more towards this, but I can't find a previous version. But it does mean that you can create some kind of interesting combos. Things like a fairy monk might be fun, or a fairy barbarian would be hilarious. Especially with some of the abilities that they have. But another thing I find kind of interesting is compared to a lot of the other races in Monsters of the Multiverse, the fairy race is really, really, really simple. Mechanics wise, creature type, you're Fey, and then your size is small. And being small, like I said, being small can come with some issues, like again, using weapons with the heavy property or the two-handed property cause issues when you're small versus if you're medium or large. Your walking speed is the 30 feet, and that's kind of the basis of it. They don't have dark vision, which I find strange since most Fae have dark vision. Obviously not all Fae, but most Fae have dark vision. And again, with how limited this race is, I would almost kind of expect it to kind of offset the fact that there's really not a whole lot here. The next big thing you get, being a fairy, is called fairy magic, which gives you effectively two different things. One, the druid craft cantrip, and that is really kind of the prestidigitation for druids. It just lets you do some kind of harmless nature stuff. So you can make a flower bloom, or you can make, a light breeze come up, or you can make a 5-foot area smell faintly of skunk. So it's just I try not to downplay how useful those prestidigitation style cantrips are, because those are the cantrips when you are role-playing a character. Those are the cantrips that really help you feel magical. as opposed to cantrips like, Firebolt or something like that, which is, I can attack things. But Druidcraft, Prestidigitation, things like that, they're designed to be things that you just use all the time. Mage Hand is another one. And it just makes you feel like when you're going through, when normally people would do certain things, you can just use your Druidcraft or your Prestidigitation or something to do things for you, and you can just feel very, very magical. And so, if you are playing a fairy, I would lean kind of heavily into using that Druidcraft cantrip all the time. Again, lore-wise, if you look at like a monster manual version of the fairy, fairies are known to be tricksters. In D&D, fairies are kind of built around the idea of them really enjoying kind of tormenting people playfully. They don't tend to be, vicious or anything like that, though you can play them that way. But they tend to be very kind of detached from most mortal races, and because of that, they find it really, really fun to mess with people and play games with them. And so, if you really focus on the Druidcraft as that aspect of your fairy, background and little lore, you can really have a lot of fun with it. Making, especially again, the fact that you can make smells and stuff like that. Like, as horrible as this sounds, smells can be a lot of fun. And there are a lot of really great pranks you can pull involving smells. So, yeah, that, to me, that is, as much as it seems kind of like useless and pointless, to me, that is kind of the core aspect of the fairy. I would actually almost wish, I kind of wish they gave them more stuff that they could use to be that kind of trickster aspect. But the rest of fairy magic, because that's just the first line of fairy magic, there's more. Starting at 3rd level, you can cast Fairy Fire. At 5th level, you can cast Enlarge Reduce. Once you cast Fairy Fire or Enlarge Reduce with this trait, you can't cast a spell again until you finish a long rest. And you can cast either of those spells using any spell slots, blah, blah. And then choose Intelligence, Wisdom, or Charisma when you choose this race, and that's your spellcasting modifier for it. So, 2 things. 1, Fairy Fire. I've said this many, many times. Fairy Fire is one of the most underutilized spells in the entirety of D&D 5th edition, and I've never understood why. Because it is so incredibly useful. Like, there's just so many useful things about Fairy Fire. It's it makes it so creatures can't turn invisible. It gives everybody advantage on attack rolls against them, and probably the biggest thing, as long as they fail their initial save, they cannot save out of it. It is a one-time roll. As long as you don't lose concentration on it, you get to have a Fairy Fire just for the full, I think it's a minute or 10 minutes. What is it? So it's a minute. But again, a minute is 10 turns. Average combat is only going to run anywhere between about 4 to 6 turns. So that is the entirety of combat. You have advantage on all your attack rolls against up to technically 4 targets, because it's a 10-foot area. This is so at most you can fit 4 people into that area, unless they're like small or unless they're tiny, because tiny you could technically fit 8 in that area. But so yeah, Fairy Fire, super, super useful. Enlarge Reduce, again, your mileage may vary. Enlarge Reduce can be kind of useful if you are a martial-based class, because your weapon gets bigger with you and you do extra damage with it. However, again, if you lean more into that trickster aspect, there's a lot of little tricks and things like that you can do with it. Because one of the unique things about Enlarge Reduce is you cause a creature or an object you can see within range to grow larger or smaller for the duration. And if the target's unwilling, makes a con save. So there are some kind of battlefield benefits to doing it. Again, if you reduce a creature, their weapons get smaller as well, so they do a d4 less damage. If you make them grow, they do a d4 more damage. The other thing that's kind of interesting, if you reduce a creature, they have disadvantage on strength checks and strength saving throws, which can be really, really useful if you have someone like a Battle Master fighter, and they use, I think it's called Pushing Attack, because that's a strength saver. There's quite a few other things that involve strength saving throws. So giving, anytime you can impose disadvantage on saving throws, it's a useful thing. However, again, if you're looking more around the idea of the trickster, there you can have a lot of fun if somebody wakes up and they find out that their greatsword is now a letter opener. You know, that can be really, really hilarious. Now, it only lasts for a minute, but for a minute you can go, where's your, oh, here, let me get your greatsword for you. Your tiny little greatsword. Or using it on a chair. Like there's so many different things you can do if you want to be just a real tricksy kind of person. That can be really, really fun. And it's a ranged spell. You know, it's got a 30-foot range. So right as someone's sitting down in a chair, if you reduce the chair and watch them fall on the floor, you know, there's a lot of different things you can do with it if you want to lean into that tricksy aspect of it. So yeah. The only other thing that fairies have is flight. You have a flying speed equal to your walking speed, and you can't use your flying speed if you're wearing medium or heavy armor. So that does limit them a little bit, because again, that is the entirety of the fairy stat block. Is here are 2 spells. You can cast either one of them once a day, and that's it. And then you also have Druidcraft, and then you can fly. If we compare that to like the Aarakocra, which was the first quote-unquote broken race in D&D, Aarakocra get a heck of a lot more than just, oh, you get to fly. They have their talons, they have wind collar, which allows them to cast Gust of Wind, and they're a medium-sized creature. So, yeah, it just, the fairy race just seems really, really kind of underpowered. And I wonder if it's just the idea that, again, flying... Thank you, phone. You probably didn't hear that, but my phone, or actually my tablet just beeped at me. Flying, if you combine it with, like, again, any kind of range thing, can become very overpowered very quickly. Excuse me. Wow. This has something in my throat, and it's killing me. Sorry about this, folks. Yeah, so, it's, I mean, again, flying can be difficult, but, again, just like the Aarakocra, you don't have the ability to hover, so if you get knocked prone when you're in the air, you plummet. Things that reduce your flying, your speed to 0 will cause you to fall as well. Like, it's not the most overpowered thing ever, and it feels like, like I said, I think there could have been something else added to this, or at least changing the Fairy Fire and Large Reduce thing to be tied to your proficiency bonus instead of a one and done. Because, again, Fairy Fire and Large Reduce, both really useful spells. Not quite useful enough for me to consider them a one and done ever. Like, it is such a limited thing that it's hard for me to ever want to recommend to someone that they should try the fairy as it's written here. At the bare minimum, I would give them night vision and then some other, like at least another cantrip to let them be more tricksy with. Because yeah, this just feels super underpowered. Especially with, again, how cool fairies are in D&D. I would feel, especially if I was someone that is like, you know what, I've always wanted to play a fairy character. I've always thought that would be really, really cool. And they finally get to play a fairy character, and this is the way they have to play it. I would be very upset because this feels almost like a punishment. You're a small creature, so you're going to have problems with certain weapons. Your two kind of cool things about your class are you have a single one and done spell, which is a first level and a second level. You have a choice between a first and a second level spell. That's it. And you get to do it once per day. That's really, really underpowered. Again, we talk about the Eladrin. They get access effectively. They get access to a second level spell that is a teleportation spell plus extra efforts, and it's not actually a spell, so it can't be counterspelled. Like, compare that to the fairy, and it just feels really, really underwhelming. So yeah, I'm not going to go too much into the flight thing because we've talked about flight quite a few other times. So yes, flying good, use it to your advantage, but wow, does the fairy just feel bad in 5th edition. This would be one of the few ones where I'm like, you know what, that was a miss. That was a big miss. Like, swing and a miss. Not even swing and a miss. This was, you went down looking. Didn't even swing at a single pitch. 3 strikes, and you're gone. Wow. Well, moving on. Next up is the Firbolg. Firbolgs are really interesting. And again, the original version of the full Firbolg has a ton of lore behind it. It showed up in, I think it was Mordenkainen's Tome of Foes. No, Volo's Guide to Monsters. Sorry. It showed up in Volo's Guide to Monsters. And they're really, really cool. An interesting thing, like, a lot of people don't know what a Firbolg is. Firbolgs are related to giants. They're not technically giant kin, but they're kind of cousins. And they make their home in forests, but they're kind of like the D&D version of, like, the D&D personification of the gentle giant trope. You know, these are relatively large creatures, but they're very they have a lot of animalistic kind of traits. They tend to have a lot of fur and body hair and things like that. And they're very closely associated with nature and with animals. And everything about them is just built around this idea of they are just really nice, nature-loving people. And they have all these different abilities that allow them to kind of exist in nature without having to kind of compete with anyone, without having to really be afraid for themselves. And they can just be really cool. The old version of the Firbolg was highly associated with druids. It was really, really common for Firbolgs to be druids because it worked so well together. The new version, got to keep this all organized. The new version makes some changes that you would expect. First things first, humanoid, medium size, walking speed is 30 feet. We all know this. No dark vision, which again isn't a huge issue. Though lore-wise, I do find it slightly weird, just because they're out in nature so much. You would, I guess they're not underground or anything like that, so they wouldn't desperately need dark vision. But whatever. The next thing, or the first thing that they could get is called Firbolg magic. Now, the old version of this is really, really similar. Basically, you can cast Detect Magic and Disguise Self. The old version, it was tied to your Wisdom score. The new version, obviously, choose Intelligence, Wisdom, Charisma. They give you a little bit more freedom with it. And they are one and done, long rest abilities. The old one was you could cast either Detect Magic or Disguise Self, and then you got it back on a short or long rest. The new one is just a long rest because they do other things that make them kind of cool. And detect magic is really useful. Like there are so many different things that you can get out of it. And the other thing that's kind of useful about detect magic is you also learn the school of magic. Like if you're looking at detect magic and there's a spell affecting something, you'll be able to see it. It kind of glows to you. And you learn what school of magic it is. You won't learn the spell itself. You need like an identify spell for that. But you can find out the school of magic that is being that it belongs to, and that actually can be really, really useful. If you are like wandering around a forest and you find, a rock that has a magical glow to it, use detect magic and find out there's evocation magic in it. Maybe you want to steer clear of the rock because evocation magic causes things, fireball is evocation magic. So things like that. Or if you find, a squirrel wandering around and you see that it's like radiating transmutation magic, this may have been a former adventurer, or it may be a dragon that adventurers dealt with using true polymorph. You never know. But you can see that, there's transmutation magic on this. Maybe we should investigate this squirrel more. Squirrel! So yeah, disguise self is another one that we've talked about it before with the changeling and everything. It has its use. It has a lot of different uses. That's not kind of the cool thing about Firbolgs. Those are both interesting things. But the cool thing comes next. That is thing called Hidden Step. It existed in both the old version and the new version. The old version, bonus action, you can turn invisible until the start of your next turn, until you attack, make a damage roll, or force someone to make a saving throw. Once you use this, you can't use it again until you finish a short or long rest. As a one and done ability, that is super, super let down thing because you only can use it once. And there are a lot of situations where turning invisible until the start of your next turn or until you make an attack can be super useful. Turning invisible in order for someone to make an opportunity attack against you, they have to be able to see you. So turning invisible can be used as a way to prevent getting opportunity attacks. And that can be defensive or offensive. If you need to get close to some, a spellcaster and they have their big dudes in front of them, you invisible yourself and you can go right around them and then go up. Also, it lasts until the start of your next turn. So again, you can use it offensively or defensively. However, so like at the end of your turn, after you've done all your attacking, you can go invisible and just move a little bit, and there's very little chance anyone's going to be able to hurt you. But again, old version, it's one and done. So if you're playing a race, or if you're playing a class that doesn't have a bonus action, yeah, you'll probably use it. Because it is a bonus action, you're probably going to have a lot of different times to use it. However, the new version of this, you can use this trait a number of times equal to your proficiency bonus, regaining all uses when you finish a long rest. That turns it into something really interesting. And it really fits in with the lore. Again, Firbolgs tend to shy away from society, tend to shy away from other creatures and things like that. So the ability to just turn invisible for a little bit while people are coming through your forest or something like that makes perfect sense. It makes them very, very good at being able to kind of watch people and keep an eye on things and yet be able to kind of move away before anyone can even tell that they're there. From a mechanical standpoint, again, that invisibility can be so useful both in and outside of combat. Even something as simple as being able to turn invisible and then just position yourself in a different place in a crowd can be incredibly useful. A lot of people kind of undervalue the ability to melt into a crowd. And in real life, like it is remarkably difficult to track someone when there's a lot of people around, and if they understand how to use a crowd effectively, they literally can disappear in it. Well, what happens if you can actually disappear and appear as a different in a different spot. You know, a lot of times when you're tracking someone, you're through a crowd or anything like that, you're looking for movement and you're kind of connecting the little points where you can see them to go. If their line of movement goes here and then stops and then they appear somewhere else sitting at a table, you know, drinking a coffee or reading a menu or something, you're going to have such a hard time catching them again. So yeah, like, you know, there's so many different things you can use a bonus action invisibility. And then again, things like if your opponent can't see you, you have advantage on your attack rolls. So you can use that bonus action visibility to give you advantage on an attack roll you really, really need to make. Invisibility breaks line of sight. There's so many other things you can use for that. So yeah, super, super cool, super interesting. I likes it. Moving on. The next thing they have is Powerful Build, which is, I believe, identical to the other thing. Basically, you count as one size larger when determining your carrying capacity and weight you can push, drag, or lift. And again, that's just based on them formerly being giants. Or not formerly being, but being distant cousins of giants. And then Speech of Beast and Leaf. You have the ability to communicate in a limited manner with beasts, plants, and vegetation. They can understand the meaning of your words, though you have no special ability to understand them in return. You have advantage on all charisma checks you make to influence them. So, if you're trying to make friends with a pupper, you're really, really good at it. And again, that's basically identical to the old version of it as well. And again, it really fits into that kind of nature watcher kind of position that they've held in lore for so long. Now, again, because the ability score improved, like the old version, you got wisdom and strength were your two ability score increases. And it meant that, again, they made very good druids, but they also made remarkably good clerics. A lot of people, when they think of clerics, because they are full casters, they think of most clerics as single attribute dependent classes, where all they need is a wisdom score, and then they can just go to town. It is remarkably common for clerics to also have a high strength score. These clerics, depending on which subclass you choose, they do. Some of them do get proficiency in heavy armor, and heavy armor generally requires you to have a high strength score. Otherwise, you have it reduces your movement speed. And when you have heavy armor, because it's not affected at all by your dexterity, you can use dex as a dump stat, or maybe not a full dump stat, but just, you know, not put as many points into dexterity. So the old version of Firbolgs worked really, really well as clerics and as druids, because that was what they were, you know, lore-wise. Now that you can do anything, you know, you can make a Firbolg barbarian with the ability to turn invisible and then show up. Obviously, a Firbolg rogue could have a lot of fun. But you could even have fun being like a Firbolg wizard, like a Firbolg blade dancer would be a hell of a lot of fun to play. Because being able to bonus action, turn invisible, go around and then make your blade spell attacks with advantage, possibly getting crits on them, that could be a lot of fun to play, depending on the rules of your world. Again, blade singing, when it was first introduced, was limited to elves. Only elves could be it. I can't remember if when they reintroduced it in Tasha's, they made it something that any race could do. But I can find out since I have it right here. Wizard blade singing. Yeah, there's nothing in here that mentions specifically you have to be... Yeah, it specifically said, originally created by the elves, this version has been adopted by non-elf practitioners who honor and expand the elven ways. So, even if you do have like a real stickler for rules and racial limitations for a Dungeon Master, just going with Tasha's, anyone could be a blade singer. And I think a Firbolg blade singer would be a lot of fun. You know, that bonus action invisibility could be a blast. You know, being able to use all the other spells. Like, those are the kind of characters I enjoy making, are just weird combinations that you wouldn't think about. The Fairy Barbarian, the Firbolg Blade Singer. I mean, they're just fun and they're interesting. So, yeah. The next race is actually the Genasi, which they have 4 different races. Like I said, they got rid of sub races. So instead of kind of chopping it up and doing that in 2 videos, my next video will just be the Genasi. So that is where this is going to end for today. Final thoughts on both of them. Like I said, the Fairy just feels underpowered, and I would say give them something else. Give them an additional cantrip or something that fits in a little bit. Like, give them the Mage Hand cantrip, if nothing else, because that could totally be a fairy kind of thing. But just giving them a Druidcraft cantrip and the ability to fly, and then can cast either Fairy Fire or Enlarge Reduce once per day, really kind of sucks, and it doesn't feel very good at all. I'm not sure about turning Fairy Magic into tied to the proficiency bonus. I'm not sure if that would unbalance anything. That would be something you would need to playtest. That could be another way, so that they have something that they can do that feels more special than, oh, I'm small and I can fly. Firbolg, on the other hand, Firbolg looks really fun. Like, there really isn't a whole lot to the Firbolg that I'm like before they were interesting. And now with Hidden Step being tied to your proficiency bonus, it's a cool race. I highly recommend. Give it a shot. Make something weird. Turn into a cloaking monk, or you know, be a ranger. Like a Firbolg ranger would be, lore-wise, would be really, really interesting. A ranger that can turn invisible could be super, super fun, especially with Hunter's Mark and all that. Like, you could do lots of fun with that. But anyway, that is going to be all for me today. As always, remember to like the video. Like the video, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell icon, and turn notifications on in the comments down below. What do you think would be the weirdest combination of either Fairy or Firbolg that you can come up with? What is just the weirdest, most bizarre use of any one of those races? Let me know in the comments down below. Otherwise, again, that is all for me today, and I'll see you guys next time, alright? Bye-bye.